Ship's counselor Deanna Troi. I mean, I love her, but there are times she feels like she's one Kathy-style flop sweat away from being the most stereotypically written woman in the history of science fiction. In fact, just sub in chocolate for wildly triple extreme perspiration, and that's Troi. Marina Sirtis, who played Deanna, once pointed out that so long as her cleavage was showing, her brain seemed to go right out the window. So, compared with some other Next Generation characters, judging Troi's romantic exploits is kinda tricky because she's not always written as a healthy, sexually active adult woman. But the exciting thing is, Troi evolves over the course of 7 seasons and 4 movies in ways that are pretty wild and highly entertaining. There's bad boys and implied three-ways and role play, and that is just a start. She puts Anastasia Steele to shame. This is 50 Shades of Troi. All right, here's how we're gonna do this. We're gonna look at Troi through the lens of 3 different relationships. 2, you could probably guess, Worf and Riker. And the third, who we'll start with, is maybe a little less expected. We're not talking about Mom Walks on a Troi. We're not talking about BFF Beverly Crusher. We are talking about chronic anxiety haver, transporter phobe, and holodeck addict, Lieutenant Reginald Barclay.
I look forward to your report, Mr. Broccoli.
No, I don't think Deanna and Reg ever, went to warp together. But Barclay was fixated on Troi when we first meet him in a super creepy way. And I think by accident, Barclay's perception of Troi revealed her flaws as much as his. So check this out. In Barclay's very first scene, he's on the holodeck, he's playing out a fantasy where he roughs up LaForge and Riker, all while Holo Troi gets a front row seat to be impressed by Barclay's prowess. Computer freeze program. Now, why does Reg place Troi in this role? She's not the only woman on the ship he fantasizes about. He's got Beverly co-starring as like a sexy mom, which is gross, but since Crusher is a mom and she is, an attractive woman, it's the kind of gross that makes sense. So, way to go, Reg. So the question before the court is, does it also make sense for Barclay to believe that Troi would be into an aloof bad boy who oozes power and control? The episode we're talking about, Holo Pursuit, takes place mid-season 3, so let's look at Troi's behavior for the first 3 years of her time on the Enterprise and see if Barclay's vision of her matches up in any way with reality. So first we know that Troi dated and quickly fell in love with a then Ensign William T. Riker, even though he was almost completely focused on his career. And since Troi is literally an empath and knew he would probably leave her, she went full Imzadi anyway, because survey says she liked Riker because he was passionate yet aloof and he could control her heart. Then there's Haven, where we meet Wyatt Miller, a guy who Troi has an arranged marriage with, kind of weird in the 24th century. She's not into him or the idea of the marriage at all until he beams aboard the Enterprise with another woman on his mind. Then, all of a sudden, this total stranger is someone she could share thoughts with. Okay, Troi. And he's such a risk taker that he beams aboard a plague ship for love. Bad boy, bold risk taker, unattainable. I'm just saying. And then things get real interesting when Troi meets a deaf negotiator named Reva, who speaks through a chorus of 3 people, one of whom represents his passion, libido, and this is a quote, anarchy of lust. So, his boner basically, and Reva's boner only talks to Troi.
Perhaps after the briefing by your captain that you will be hungry. And that perhaps we could dine together and compare experiences.
I'd like that.
As will I.
Will he be with us?
Well, until we find our own method of communication.
And pretty much everything he says boils down to, hey, I know I'm a freaky looking ginger with super baggy clothes, but we gonna do it anyway, girl. And Troi seems to like that forceful, vaguely kinky, 3-way assumed situation. And finally, there's Devononi Rawl, the dude whose emotions Troi can't read because he's also a telepath. He gets real intense, like right away, just getting up in that Troi personal space, and she loves it. she and Bev have a space yoga chat all about just how into that she is. Basically what I'm saying is, Lieutenant Barclay concluded that Troi is into volatile, emotionally unavailable men who aren't afraid to touch people they don't really know. And, yeah, no lies detected there. Barclay is definitely a creep, but he's also kind of right. I'm not saying Troi is bad, but not altogether unlike Jessica Rabbit. She is kind of drawn that way. At least at first. But believe it or not, though, Deanna Troi does evolve, and the best way to prove that is to take a quick hop across parallel dimensions with the second person on our list, Mr. Worf. So there's a season 7 episode called Parallels where Worf accidentally keeps laterally moving from universe to universe, and one of the things he's surprised to discover is that in multiple instances, he and Troi are married, sometimes even with children. And they've been together for years, dating back to a season 5 episode called Ethics. Now, that might sound surprising because Troi is very touchy-feely and Worf is very painsticks and strong-minded exes and future wives who beat the hell out of him for sexy fun times. But right around season 5 is where Troi becomes a lot tougher. There's an episode called Violations where a telepath named Jev puts her in a coma, but she comes out of it and messes him right up. And then there's Alcar from Man of the People, who pours all of his negative energy into Troi, which basically causes her to turn into a dom? Yikes, Troi. Have a safe word. And even though it's not a relationship thing, there is Face of the Enemy where Troi is forced to pretend she's a Romulan agent and goes from, I don't know what to do, to I will shove you out an airlock in the span of a commercial break. I mean, damn. You got some rage, Deanna. Basically, by the time you get to the series finale, All Good Things, it feels plausible that Troi would be down for some paint sticks.
I've always found the Black Sea at night to be a most stimulating experience.
Worf, the most you can say is stimulating?
Very stimulating. What?
She definitely has evolved away from being a damsel and into the mysterious stranger who rolls into town and kicks a little ass. I mean, I told you she was into roleplay. Somehow, though, by the time we get to the TNG movies, things have changed again. And in the end, Troi comes full circle and winds up marrying Riker. Now, people love to rag on these characters, myself included. They both make so many bad choices, but somehow, they still genuinely make sense together. They never really fell out of love in the first place, but their feelings evolve like a lot. Like in The Loss, where Deanna loses her telepathic abilities. The only person to be both empathetic and critical of Troi is Riker. He's the only one that gets her. And in Second Chances, when Troi falls in love with a transporter duplicate of Riker who never abandoned her for his career in the first place, who is it who cares for her when Riker 2.0 pulls the same, sorry but my career routine? OG Riker. Sometimes the Imzadi thing works, sometimes it doesn't.
Imzadi.
Oh, please.
Sometimes they kiss, sometimes they don't. But Riker and Troi laugh together, they cry together, they shave Riker's beard together, and after 7 seasons and 4 movies, Troi becomes the kind of person who actually helps Barclay become less creepy, who inspires Worf to be a better father. Riker finally becomes the captain of his own ship, and bonus, Troi even allowed to wear an actual uniform sometimes. And she definitely doesn't let scuzzy dudes root around in her mind. Just look at alien Ron Perlman in Nemesis. He tries that and she kicks his psychic ass. And those are the 50 Shades of Troi. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I'm gonna go have myself a chocolate sundae. Computer and program.